Looking back at 2020, GX World has had a bit of a rough time compared to the other Duel Links worlds, with Blair Flanagan being our only new GX character unlock, and that was right at the start of the year. Fast forward 7 months and we're now into October, expecting in a few weeks the roaming event for Axel Brodie, who is the focus of today's video if you couldn't really tell from the title. With Axel being a roaming character, there is a 99.75% chance that we'll see him unlockable very shortly after. I'm personally hedging my bets in the early December timeframe, but when that does happen, what will it look like, what will his unlock cards be, and what skills might he have? So today we're going to unlock the vault of my Duel Links What If series and try and predict what might be to come, along with some solid justification so that I'm not just putting out a wish list of hopes and dreams that will likely never be met. And of course, if you enjoy this video at all, feel free to leave a like, hit subscribe as we try to reach 50,000 subscribers, and let me know down below what you think and want to see when Axel becomes unlockable, hopefully in the near future. So without further ado, let's dive right in. Axel Brodie, known in Japan as Austin O'Brien, is a student hailing from West Academy who enters Duel Academy in the 3rd year. A battle-hardened and efficient mercenary, he is introduced as Thelonious Viper's right-hand man, but later joins with Jaden's group after escaping from the prison Viper placed him in when his usefulness had come to an end. Thanks to Yu-Gi-Oh! Wikia for that enthralling character profile. I didn't really want to spend time writing that one myself. So Volcanics are Axel's main anime archetype, and if you've been in Duel Links for a while now, then you'll know we actually have a good chunk of his cards in the game already, so this is kind of a unique situation for a character unlock. I think the most apt comparison is with the Paradox Brothers back in 2017, when we got Gate Guardian in like the 1st or 2nd main box. Volcanics are primarily a burn-based strategy, whether they do that from simply having their monsters on board, or using them with the Blaze Accelerator lineup of cards that work to destroy your opponent's monsters by sending Volcanics from your hand to the graveyard as fodder. And in Duel Links, we haven't really seen Volcanics take off. They're missing way too many cards that really make the deck function as optimally as it can do, and there's a good reason for that. It's all about the burn damage. We also know Konami have changed their stance on burn cards, opting to introduce some to the game by halving the amount of damage they do, and it's likely they'll do the same for Axel's own roaming event, which is confirmed. The Volcanic Slicer will be an obtainable card, which in the TCG deals 500 damage once per turn, but in Duel Links it's likely it's going to be dealing 250, which means that half the Volcanic deck does the main damage, and half is going to do this decreased halved burn damage. That's a lot easier to swallow if you happen to be facing a field full of slicers. 750 per turn compared to 1500, that's quite nice. So now that that's out of the way, let's quickly talk about what format his unlock event will take, at least in my opinion. I'm a really big fan of Callan Kessler's unlock event style, not the raid event one, but the roulette one, the one we're bound to have repeated at the end of next month, and I could easily see Konami reskinning this event to work for Axel, especially with Axel's dual disc in the show being a freaking gun. They could do some really cool things like having to spend collected tokens on ammunition, in this case they might be mini volcanic shells, and then the resulting blast would fire out a volcanic monster of a high level, and that would determine either the level you duel Axel at, or if there are any challenges or conditions involved in those duels. That's something I think is sorely lacking in Duel Links' events. Yes, you have things like the Duels Chronicles that give you extra lottery coins for summoning Stardust Dragon or using a certain character for example, but what if these challenges actually mattered? Things like you start the duel with X life points or win in 3 turns, giving exciting challenges with meaningful rewards could simply be prismatics, 1-gem bonuses, or whatever, just something that makes the events feel like they need to be played, rather than straight auto-dueled, which would be quite nice. Other than that, the rest of Callan's event was pretty great, apart from this somewhat limited reward list, so maybe increase the number of stages in the event and you've got a solid event there, Konami. Now let's tackle one other problem, his ace monster. As I mentioned earlier, Axel is similar to the Paradox Brothers in that his ace monster, Volcanic DOOMFIRE, is already available in game as an ultra rare from a years old main box. DOOMFIRE is a level 8 pyro with 3000 attack and 800 defense points that cannot be normal summoned or set and can only be special summoned by sending one face-up Tri-Blaze Accelerator you control to the graveyard. He forces your opponent's monsters to attack him during the battle phase, and when he destroys a monster, he nukes the rest of your opponent's monsters and deals 500 of burn damage to each one destroyed. So yeah, he's a real beefy boy with a really cool effect, but lacks any form of protection, meaning that most of the time, he's going to be hit by some form of spot removal pretty quickly, and the deck itself doesn't really have many ways of stopping this from happening, so it's kind of a flaw in the archetype itself rather than just specifically in DOOMFIRE. So how do we incorporate this into a skill? Because they aren't just going to give us another copy of the card from a main box, they just won't ever do that. Well, I took some inspiration from the anime-only trap card Volcanic Force and came up with this. Begin the duel with Tri-Blaze Accelerator face up in your spell and trap card zone. From turn 3 onwards, you can send one Tri-Blaze Accelerator you control to the graveyard to place one Volcanic Doomfire from outside your deck onto the field. You can only use this skill once per duel. In the anime, the trap allows you to special Doomfire from your hand, deck or graveyard by ignoring its summoning conditions. I felt this was against the spirit of most character ace skills that let you have easy access to the monster, and so I adapted it so that even if your Tri-Blaze Accelerator that was played by the skill was removed by something like Cosmic Cyclone, then you could still get value out of the skill with Doomfire later on in the duel by using your own Tri-Blaze Accelerator that you're running in your deck anyway. Simply summoning Doomfire turn 1 wouldn't be fun in my opinion, since it's likely your opponent will A, have an immediate out to it, and B, would be forced to spend their first turn attacking into it, and any plays they make would just kind of be stopped dead in tracks and they'd be kind of non-interactive, and I don't think that's very fun. Tri-Blaze by itself already has a hard enough setup condition, so being able to summon a turn 1 Doomfire outside the skill anyway is near impossible, and I didn't want players to just be able to cheese it out, unless of course they got lucky and just drew a copy of Doomfire by itself by main decking it, and they draw it turn 1. That is completely fine and would be a fun time on the ladder. Now, GX characters have the privilege of being lucky enough to have 45 levels worth of character rewards to unlock, and if we use Blair as a template of how many cards, copies, etc., then we get the following ratios of unlockable cards. We have 3 copies of 1 normal, 3 copies of 2 rares, 3 copies of 2 supers, and 1 copy of 1 ultra. And we know from like Zexal World we've had like 3 copies of an ultra and 3 copies of a rare, so they aren't going to sit there and be too worried about sticking to those strict guidelines. But with Axel, it's going to be pretty tricky, because we're talking about burn damage here, and Konami likely won't want to load us up with burn cards that work together in an archetype, so I'm willing to bet we get less volcanic cards here than we do more generic fire support cards, even if those other fire support cards all have a burn theme to them. So I'm going to work backwards, starting off with our ultra rare card, Volcanic Queen. This is kind of like a mini lava golem in that it can only be special summoned to your opponent's side of the field by tripping one of their monsters, and if you do, you're locked out of summoning for that turn. However, Queen has an effect your opponent can use in that turn. Once per turn, they can send one other card they control to the graveyard to inflict 1000 damage to the opponent, in this case of course, you. And in Duel Links, this will be changed to 500, but it still gives them a way to fight back without removing itself, so it's not as devastating as Lava Golem. Also, during the end phase, your opponent can either tribute one other monster they control, or take 1000 damage. Again, I assume it's going to be 500, but either tribute another card, take 500, kind of reminds me of Yubel in a way, but it is a nice way to clog up your opponent's board, and clearly, the strategy here is to use Volcanic Queen to get over a big problem monster your opponent has, like one of their shiny new Xyz monsters they just invested 3 materials into by special summoning her in defense mode, then use a monster you control to get her off the field since she has a relatively weak 1200 defense just by battle, you can get rid of her. So basically, you're going to be getting rid of a big monster your opponent controls, destroying that, clearing the way for your opponent with a pretty free field. And since it requires one less tribute than Lava Golem, this could easily be considered one of Duel Links' first kaijus, if it were to come. Hence why I think Konami would want to hard limit it to 1 copy, just in case it was teched into every deck under the sun, kinda like how Lava Golem was back in the day. Now I'm going to immediately take something back. There is no way in hell Konami is going to give us 3 copies of any of the rest of Axel's missing TCG released Volcanic cards. I can definitely see 1 or 2 copies, but not 3, and for a very specific one, I think that will be reserved for a character exclusive skill. Volcanic Counter I'm putting as a super rare, we can get a maximum of 2 copies of. When you take bound damage this card in your graveyard, banish it, then if there is a fire monster with other than a counter in your graveyard, you inflict damage to your opponent equal to the amount you took. Volcanics love putting things into the graveyard with things like Blaze Accelerator, so this card is very likely to be live 95% of the time. Again, let's halve the damage so it's a bit more manageable, but the fact this card isn't searchable in Engine outside of say Blaze Accelerator Reload is a blessing in disguise, so if we don't get Reload, Counter might just be alright. Volcanic Wall is an anime-only continuous spell card that allows you to send the top 3 cards of your deck to the graveyard to inflict 500 points of damage to your opponent for every pyro type sent that way. It's a once per turn effect and locks you out from attacking the turn you do, and again, we halve it to 250, and I think this will be fine, but not at 3 copies. I could also see them adapting this into a skill as a once per duel skill, maybe a twice per duel skill. That might be a fun way of bringing Volcanic Wall into the game, rather than as a card. So that could be kind of interesting. Now the rest of the cards I think will have some generic fire support, or support for other pyro based archetypes we have in Duel Links already like Flamveil and Hazy Flame. They do have some cards left to give us, the former focusing on more burn-related shenanigans and the latter exceeds plays, so I think those are probably off the table, or they just throw them in the card trader and call it a day. Sorry Whitey Dan. Fencing Fire Ferret is a perfect example of such a card. Level 4 with a decent stat line that if it's destroyed by battle by card effect and sent to the graveyard, target face a monster your opponent controls and destroy it. Then if you do, inflict what would be 250 damage to your opponent. The effect is mandatory and would A. Give low tier silver decks a somewhat decent generic monster card to play in rank 4 decks with the power of the Guardians, and B. Could kinda work with some of the Fire King stuff if it took your fancy, and C at the same time, give Axel's AI deck some firepower when he doesn't have any shells or scattershots handy in hand. Yeah, that totally made sense. Soul of Fire is a card that debuted in the same TCG set Force the Breaker as the Volcanic archetype and is a normal spell that forces your opponent to draw a card. Then, you select one pirate from your deck and banish it, inflicting damage to your opponent equal to half its attack points. In Duel Links, this would be a quarter, and at worst would be a burn for 750 if you were to send a Doomfire, or a Subterra Behemoth Ultramathus for its effect. I think that's kind of okay. FIREWALL is another continuous trap card that again was released in the same set, and allows to negate opponents' direct attacks by banishing a pirate type in your graveyard. Of course, this is kinda counterproductive to the whole Volcanic strategy, but it's usually a last-ditch effort to ensure your survival. However, you must pay 500 life to reach your standby phase to keep this card active, so most likely, you'll use this to survive a turn worth of attacks, and then plan your next move depending on what you draw for turn. I think that's kind of the obvious use case here. Backfire is yet another trap card that is continuous, and when a face-up fire you control is destroyed and sent to the graveyard, you inflict damage to your opponent. This would be 250 again in Duel Links due to the nerfs, but in moderation, this wouldn't be so bad. Unless of course someone came up with some broken degenerate OTK deck. I'm looking at you RY Duel Links, I think you might be able to do it. So if we get this, feel free to break this card into existence. And this one's a little out there, but one card I personally would like to see, just so I can remake my childhood deck, is Solar Flare Dragon, but he's a little problematic because he can't be attacked while there's another Pyro on the field. And in the end phase, he would deal 250 damage to the opponent. With the amount of removal in Duel Links nowadays, cards with effects like this aren't so obnoxious, so it wouldn't surprise me if Konami added this, but again, Axel is a tough one to work out ratios for, with anything volcanic or burn related. Like, it's hard guys, come on. And one card that is technically volcanic support is Wildfire. This is used in every single one of Axel's Tag Force decks and basically gives you a dark hole by paying 500 life points and having a Blaze Accelerator on the field. Whilst the restriction is definitely there, I don't personally think that's enough to justify that effect, even if Volcanics have a very minute chance of ever seeing competitive play. Blaze Accelerator Reload is a trap card that treats itself as Tri-Blaze Accelerator, making Doomfire live in your hand, and actually gives the deck some drawing and search power outside of Volcanic Rocket. I am still unsure of this one and could see it being added as a hard one of Ultra Rare, to test the waters so to say, but I opted to leave it out of this video because I couldn't make my mind up on where I'd want to see it. Now it's time to talk about the elephant in the room, Volcanic Scattershot. This little guy deals damage if he's sent to the graveyard from anywhere, be it hand, field or deck. And if it's sent to the graveyard by the effectively Blaze Accelerator card, you can send 2 more copies of itself to the graveyard from your hand or deck to Raigeki your opponent. Now it might just be me who thinks this isn't okay, and maybe this card in particular is the reason Konami held off for so long for Axel being a character unlock, but this gives me Vijam the Cubic Seed vibes for some reason, and I think Konami will try and lock this specific card to a skill that simply adds 3 copies of this card to the deck. If all the monsters you control in the deck are volcanic monsters, kind of like the Cubic skill, but not as restrictive. Obviously, it would be great to be proven wrong, but this is the one card I have trouble seeing them adding for free at all, given that it can be abused in some non-volcanic strategies, and who knows, maybe invoked volcanics will become a thing where you would get a little bit of burn in, and then just purgature them for game. The benefit of course still is that volcanics by themselves absolutely suck at searching, so who really knows. Next up we're taking yet another anime only card and transforming it into a skill. Volcanic Mines. Can only be used if your life points are at 2000 or below. Special summon as many volcanic tokens to your opponent's side of the field in defense mode. Whilst your opponent controls a volcanic token, monsters they control cannot change their battle positions or activate their effects, and during the end phase of your opponent's next turn, you destroy all volcanic tokens. This is pretty much a copy-paste of the trap card, just changing the name of the tokens to something a little more friendly than bomb tokens, and adding a restriction to it. A stall skill that gives you a turn to pop any other monsters they may have on their board if necessary and blocks them from Xyz summoning, that could honestly see some form of play, even outside of a volcanic deck. So he does need some generic skills that would be kinda nice, and to have a Jix character come in with a method changing skill, that would be pretty fitting I think. Next up is Blaze Accelerator Loaded. send one Volcanic card from hand to the graveyard to add one BASILTRICE card from your deck to your hand. This skill can only be used once per duel. It's a generic search skill for your main combo starter, and lets you set up the graveyard with potential Volcanic counters. Might be worth putting a life point restriction on this, but I think it's fine without it, so cool. You know, I'd quite like to see this, and it might make the deck a little bit more consistent without having to rely on drawing into a Volcanic Rocket. And for the last skill I thought of is Fires of the Past. Each time you inflict effect damage this turn, your opponent takes 100 more damage. This skill can only be used once per turn and twice per duel. This skill aims to try to bring back some of the old burn damage lost in translation to Duel Links' new erratas. Not by much, but in a burn deck, every little helps in clutching out the win. I was toying with the idea of straight up inflicting double burn damage for a turn, but figured there must be some super cheesy OTK combo that would not be fun whatsoever, that you could just deal 4k damage when you're actually dealing 2k damage. You know, like Gravekeeper's Vassal might come in and see some meta play, if that was to be a thing. So I think dealing 100 more damage for every burn effect is kind of like a Trickstar play, so maybe this would be abused when Trickstars get more burn cards in the game, but for now, I think this skill would be fine. But anyway, that is it for today's Duel Links What If video. We are finally at the end. It's been a long 25-minute recording session, but we're finally here. Let me know down below what you think of Axel coming to Duel Links. Of course, we're going to be seeing him in a week and a half or so when he comes to the game, and after that, a few months to his unlock maybe. We might be getting skill leaks very soon anyway when he comes to the game, so we might not be waiting too much longer to find out just what direction Axel's going in. But let me know down below what you think again. What cards you'd like to see Axel bring to the game as unlockables, as event cards, as whatever. Anyway, thanks for watching. I'll see you all in the next Duel Links video. See you then.